What's up, everybody? My name's Julianne. I'm a knitter, a sewer, all of the above from Cleveland, Ohio, and this is my podcast, Speckled Red Knits. It's been a very hot minute since I spoke to you last. I did an episode and then didn't publish it for like 3 months. So, there's a lot of stuff that's here. And instead of making one ginormous episode, I think I'm going to break it into 3 different parts. And those parts will be as follows. If you are watching the first episode, that's awesome. But please watch the other episodes because I just can't go through all of this stuff in one episode. You'll be so bored by the end of it. So I'm going to talk about all of the things that I've knit since I last published a podcast, which was in September, but that episode was filmed at the end of May. So there's about 6 months, actually more than 6 months of knitting that I've done since that day. The second episode will be everything I'm working on right now. And the last episode will be all of the yarn I have purchased and what I'm planning to make with it. Also, I went on a pretty massive trip in the middle of all of that. So I will tell you about 1/3 of my trip in each episode. And if you want to hear about that trip, you have to watch every episode. This is not how things usually go around here, but I did a lot of thinking, and I think this is for the best smaller chunks of Julianne. So let's get into this giant stack of knitting. But first, let's talk about what I am wearing. Okay, so this sweater is called the Ingalls sweater by Caitlin Hunter. I've knit this sweater 3 other times. I knit one that was like an oatmeal with like a cream color. I knit one that was gray with a cream color that famously turned out very badly. I think I said on an episode of the podcast that I was going to fix it by like fixing the sleeves, because the issue with that one is that it looks, I think the sleeves are too short. I think that's the problem, and they're too tight on the end. So it just looks like I'm wearing floods, but like I'm wearing floods on my arm. What I'm referring to is when you wear really short pants that like aren't meant to be short. So I knit this, and it's like like charcoal with white. I knit another version of it, which is like one of my most favorite sweaters. I knit it with Rauma, which is kind of thinner than what the pattern calls for. It calls for a DK weight yarn. And I knit it in like this very dark blue with like a petrol blue, with like a light blue for the snowflakes. And I love that sweater so much. I wear it all the time. I did a gauge swatch for it, and Rauma is not, it's like, sometimes they call it like a light DK, but it's really like a sport weight. And so I think I knit it on smaller needles and I sized up. I know I can figure this out pretty easily just by counting the repeats. I love that sweater. I would love to knit another like colorful version of that. Although I kind of just did do that. But yes, I love that sweater. I love it in Rauma. The only issue is that even sizing down needles, it was still a little bit like the weave, the gauge of the fabric that it made was still a little bit looser than I wanted, and it does get like a lot of pills here. So that's like my only issue with that. But a lot of people have done that sweater in Rauma, and I love it. That it's just like one of my most favorite sweater patterns. It always looks good. It's very, you only need 2 colors, as you can see, and the color work gets done really quickly. So you just like do your little yoke, you do your color work, and then as soon as the color work's done, you do like 4 more rows, and then you split for like the sleeves and the body. And I really wanted to knit the sweater again, was starting to pick yarn for it, and then I was looking at the yarn that I was going to buy, and I remembered this cardigan I had started knitting a year ago. And I showed it on this podcast and as an example of like something that didn't work out. And I basically said that I was going that there was no hope in saving it and that I was going to frog it. But I was going to wait a long time before I did it. And the cardigan in question was it was, I think it was called the Champagne cardigan by Petite Knit. And the issue was that the sleeves were so wide. Like I finished knitting the sleeves and they were just very wide. And I hate that. I hate when sleeves are wide. So this sweater pattern, actually, the sleeves are supposed to be knit just straight from the body. So typically you do decreases so that your sleeve narrows as you knit it so that there's not like a lot of material like draping. This sweater pattern, you're actually supposed to do no decreases and then do a ton of decreases like right at the end. So you get kind of like a bell sleeve effect, but I don't like that. So I never do that when I knit this pattern. And so I don't know why I thought I would like it in this cardigan. So I didn't like the sleeves, and I was like kind of to this point with it where I needed to do this double knit binding like along the whole thing. And that was going to be so much work. It would be so annoying to rip it out. And I had already like the sleeves were messed up. I did the tubular bind off along the edge and I did it wrong. Like I got off at some point. So it looked terrible. So I was just like not sold on finishing this cardigan. And so it just needed to be ripped out. I also didn't like the mohair that I held the yarn with. So the body of that cardigan was knit with this yarn. And the mohair that I was holding it with was light enough. Like it was too light. And so you just saw it was like very visible versus like, okay, with this sweater, the mohair is very close in color to the yarn that it was held with. So you don't see, like you see the halo from the mohair, but you don't actually see like a different color yarn being held with it. So I hated that cardigan. It had been just sitting on the pile for a long time. And when I picked out other yarn colors that were almost identical to this, I thought, it's time. I just need to unravel that cardigan. And I did. And I did it over Christmas break. I'm not a teacher. I just call or a student. I just call like the week before Christmas and New Year's Christmas break. So I finally unraveled it. It was terrible, but I had time to do it. The reason it was terrible was because it was held with mohair. So now the mohair has been like twisted around the yarn. And because I wasn't going to knit this sweater with the mohair, it had to be like separated, which is so terrible. And when it's wrapped around it like that and you're peeling them apart, it's actually causing the yarn to like super coil around itself, which this is actually a problem that our cells have when we do when we're replicating our DNA, because the two strands of DNA have to be peeled apart, and there's actually a special enzyme that prevents the supercoiling from happening. And I kept thinking about this enzyme every time I sat down to peel these two pieces of yarn apart. It was terrible. I did it. It was very time intensive. It was very laborious. But I did manage to save like all of the mohair and all of this yarn. So back to the actual yarn. What is this yarn called? It's not called garbage cardigan yarn. It is the Peer Gynt yarn by Sandnesgarn, which is, I think it's I think it's a Danish knitting brand. Anyway, so I don't know what the actual color of this pink is called, but it is a DK weight yarn. It's very like a very hard wearing wool. It's twisted a lot. It's at least like 4 plies. Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say. But it's just plain wool. This is like the Peer Gynt yarn is like, I think the first yarn that Sandnesgarn ever made. So they've been making it since like the 1800s. And that, yeah, so it's a DK. The pink, the dark pink is a DK weight. So is this yarn up here. This is also by Santa's Garden, but it's a different yarn line. It's called Double Sunday. Um, so they have a regular yarn called Sunday, which is a fingering weight, and then Double Sunday is like the same fiber content, which I think might be merino wool, but it's not superwash. None of the yarns are superwash. And it's the petite knit colorway that is called like Dusty Rose or something. But I actually held the mohair that I peeled apart with the petite knit colorway for the little, the snowflakes. Was escaping me. So you're supposed to hold mohair with the colorwork yarn when you knit it, so it's like a little bit fluffy. And I haven't done that for any of the versions of this that I've knit, so I just decided to do it this time because I had the yarn handy, the mohair handy. And you can see how, like, even with this color, which is, you know, lighter than this one, that you can still see the mohair a little bit, which I hope illustrates the point I was trying to make, that it was too light to be held with this much darker pink. So yeah, it took me 2 weeks to knit this sweater. I did it in 2 weeks. And I probably spent at least 4 hours unraveling all the yarn, but I'm really glad I did it because every time I saw it on the pile, it just like pissed me off. Sorry. it it was just like taunting me that it was like there, and I love the yarn when I bought it, so it was a bummer that, and I still really would like to knit a cardigan like in this color, but that was not the yarn for it. That was not the pattern. And I'm glad that I turned it into something that I love because I love this sweater. This is like the most perfect color to wear with like blue jeans, and it looks really good with my hair. So and it was amazing that I just had it all like in my stash and I had to spend $0 because I already had the pattern. I did invest a ton of my time and sanity in unraveling the yarn, but it is a sweater now and I love it. I think I knit the smallest size because the pattern is very oversized. I don't like that. And the only other modification I made was that I knit the sleeves as regular sleeves and not the bell sleeves because I don't like that. Knitting makes you like very fussy about clothes because you can knit things to be exactly how you want. But if you buy clothes from the store, you kind of have to settle for whoever designed it. What they had imagined. I actually took this off the blocking mat and it looked really bad. Like I put it on and it looked so bad. My trick when I take something off the blocking mat is that I always end up steaming it with the iron. Like I don't put the iron on it. I just hold it near it because when you block it, you're blocking it flat. So you always end up with like seams on the side. So you like end up with like wrinkles. They're like really set in wrinkles on like the side, on the edges of the sleeve. And I know there are people out there who like put pool noodles in it and stuff, and that's just like too much work. So I just steam it for 5 minutes with the iron after to get rid of all the creases. And even after I did that, it still looked bad. Like it looked way too long. So I put it in the dryer, which proceed with caution if you do that. But I was confident that it would only look better. And it did. And it looked way better after I took it out of the dryer. It fits perfectly, and I love her so much. I love this color pink, and I don't have enough things that I've knit in this color for some reason. I love a color that I never knit with, but yes. And she came off the needles right in time because in Cleveland it's cold. It's like 10 degrees, and it just snowed. So this is my newest knit. I have like 6 months of knitting that I can show you. But first, a little update on a cute little quilt that I showed you on the last episode. It is finished. I'm going to put like some pictures in here, right here, right here. and she's off to her new home. I don't know why all of the things that I make are she's, but it feels right. I, if you recall from the last episode, was working on this cute little English paper pieced quilt for one of my college professors who had a baby, and I did end up finishing it. It took so much more time than I thought. I did take it with me on my trip, and that was something that I worked on the whole time I was in Rome, so like at least a month. And I finished the top of it while I was abroad, and then came back and finished the back of it, like actually quilted it. So it took a long time. I really thought it was going to be done sooner than it was. And I almost left it where it was and then went on my trip and was going to finish it when I got back. It would have never gotten done if I had done that, because it was just like, it took so much work. So everything was hand stitched together. And then once I finished everything, I realized I needed to put a border around it so that I could square everything up, because English paper piecing pieces are hexagons. So you're not actually making any straight edges. So you're going to have to end up like cutting things to make it a straight edge. And some people won't do that. What they'll do is they'll do the top and then they'll put it on like a, a rectangular piece of fabric, and they'll stitch it to the fabric so that they don't have to worry about the edge not being straight, because eventually you put a binding on a quilt, you can't bind a like zigzagged edge. Maybe you could, but it would look bad. So it was super fun to work on. I have so many just cute memories working on it. And it's off to its new home because my old professor had his baby, and yeah, that was just, it was super sweet to wrap it up. And it traipsed all over Europe with me in the summer, and it was so much fun. I have not started to do that again. I would love to. I have all of the little pieces. I have like 200 little squares, which I think I used like 400, at least 400 of the hexagon pieces in kind of a small quilt. But I haven't started doing it again yet because, well, first of all, it like wrecked my finger. I would have to stop to let the hole in my finger heal, because the needles that you use are very, very sharp. But yeah, I don't know. It was a very fun craft to do. I do still want to keep doing it, but it did take up a ton of time. It obviously took up a ton of knitting time. And maybe it's just like a craft that I pick up now and again, and I don't make like a project that I'm solely like focused on working on. But I am glad that the project I chose to do was a baby quilt and not a giant quilt, because it would have taken forever. So she is off to her new home, hopefully keeping a baby warm or just like looking cute in a nursery. But yeah, that's a really special project, and I'm glad it's done. So like I said, it's been 6 months since I did a podcast. It's actually been longer, but I'm not going to get into that. And I did a lot of knitting. So I actually forgot that this sweater was something that I knit since the last episode. So I was almost done knitting this on the last episode. I think it was on the sleeves. And I thought I would finish it before I left, and I did not. And that killed me. I hate leaving projects half finished. I never do it. I'm never working on 2 projects at once. And so to like have to leave it almost finished, because it wouldn't make any sense for me to take it with me on this trip to finish it on the trip, because then I would have to carry around a sweater in my suitcase. And it's not sweater weather in Rome in June. So I just had to leave it behind, and I finished it when I got back. So this is called the Novice Sweater. And I'm not going to lie, I keep looking over there because there's a mirror. I don't love it. I don't know. It's sitting weird. This is a very high neck, and what I really wanted this to be was like I wanted it to be different. I wanted the neck to have more shaping around it because it just kind of like sits up here. And I feel like I'm always pulling it down. I love the color. The color is so pretty. It's also maybe just like a touch too cropped. I don't know. I struggle with the length of sweaters because I usually end up like tucking them in a little bit. Um, but so like I was starting to make them shorter, but it doesn't always look good if it just like hits at the top of your jeans. It needs to be able to like fold over a little bit when you like half tuck it. So when I was knitting this sweater, I knit it to where I wanted it. And then I told myself, you need to knit 1 more inch because you're going to be annoyed if you don't. And that was the right call. Wisdom, you learn something with every sweater. And so this one, at the very least, needs to be a little bit longer. And at the very most needs to be ripped out and knit again, which would not be that bad because I wouldn't have to peel apart the mohair, but it would be annoying because I already knit this sweater. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if like maybe knitting up a size would have helped it. I love the color. I've obviously worn this. But I haven't worn it recently because I just get weird about things around my neck. And there's not really that much to say about this sweater if you're looking at it and you're like, I would like to knit that and learn some more things about it. I think I talked about this extensively in the last episode, so you can go there. But I don't think it's a fault of the pattern necessarily. I think the pattern is probably designed to look like this. I just didn't look close enough, like at the Ravelry pictures. I'll show you another sweater that I knit that has a collar that it's like the way I wanted this to look. And I knew it wasn't going to look that way because you have to do a lot of shaping. But I love the folded collar because I hate when collars stretch out. And I went for it. It was very easy to knit. It's if you want to knit a sweater for the first time, this is a great pattern. It's just a raglan sweater, which I love. It's so easy to knit. It's, like you don't even have to think about it. You just kind of intuitively know how to do it. So, yeah, I don't know. I need to think about this one a little bit because I do love it. I love the color. I love the gauge of the fabric, but I haven't been reaching for it because the neck is weird, man. I did do the tubular bind off on all of my edges, which I love doing. I love it. But I learned how to do the Italian bind off recently, which I like much more. It is something that it took me too long to sit down and learn how to do, and I'm glad that I learned it because I do like every bind off that way. Except if I do like 2x2 rib. So this sweater is 2x2 rib. You have to do it in 1x1 rib, or you have to like do this step that I never have the time to think about doing, where you like turn some of the knits into pearls, because you're basically just doing like the Kitchener stitch along the edge. So you have to have like knits, pearls, like a knit, pearl. It has to be 1x1 rib to work. So if you want to do it in 2x2 rib, you have to do this extra step that I'm not going to learn how to do. So yeah, I don't know. That's what I have to say about this sweater. It's knit in Knitting for Olive, their merino yarn, which is a fingering weight yarn. And I held it with the mohair in the same color. And I'm pretty sure the color is called artichoke. I don't know why. I think maybe like the insides of artichokes or the outsides. Not the part of the artichoke we eat is green, but I think the outside leaves are purple, which makes sense. Okay, so let me pull this one off the bottom. So now it has like wood chips on it. So on my last episode, I probably showed this yarn that was not knit into a sweater yet, and I told you what I wanted to do with it. And this is the only knitting project that I took with me on my trip this summer because I had that quilt to work on, and this is knit on like size 3 needles. And it took forever. So this is the only thing I knit on for like 3 months. This is also not so my thinking behind making this sweater, the project that I brought, was because I knew it would take a long time to knit. And because I was gone for so long, I didn't want to like have to bring all this yarn to knit a bunch of sweaters. And then now I have a suitcase full of sweaters and I have to now haul back. So the thought process was good. What was not maybe so thoughtful was that I didn't have a ton of time to knit. So because this wasn't even started when I got on the plane, all of the fiddly parts where you're like knitting with the cables and you have to watch the chart and the instructions still needed to be done. And that's not really what I want to do when I'm like on a train for an hour. Like I don't want to sit down and like figure this out. I just want to knit like something very easy. And that was not what I gave myself like to knit. So it did take me the entire trip to knit this because um yeah, because you just have to watch the pattern. And I was not often in situations where I could do that. So this sweater is called the Wool and Honey Sweater by Andrea Mowry Knits. It is a fingering weight pattern. It is knit in the round, but with garter stitch. So when you knit in the round with garter stitch, you're actually doing a knit row and then a purl row, versus if you knit garter stitch flat, it's all knits. And it has like this drop stitch pattern up here, which is really pretty. The yarn that I knit it in is called Modim. It's Portuguese yarn and it's very rustic, which is the type of yarn you need to knit this sweater with. So I knit this sweater before in linen quill, which is a pearl soho yarn, and it's linen and alpaca and wool. And because the yarn has a lot of drape from the linen and alpaca, that sweater got bigger every time I wore it. So number one, it was already a little bit big on me, and then every time I wore it, it just got bigger. And I love the color. I knit it in this hot pink, like Barbie pink. I love it. But that was not the sweater for it. And I actually ripped that yarn out and I haven't done anything with it yet. But I am glad that I ripped it out because I never wore that sweater. Let this be a lesson in it's okay to rip things out if they don't work out. And I would much rather rip out a sweater that's not working and use the yarn for something else than just like have it sit in a pile because I'm too sad that I wasted my time knitting it. So I did something kind of funny with this sweater in the sense that I didn't swatch. I kind of did. So because that sweater that I knit turned out so big, I, number one, needed to go down a couple of sizes. And number two, thought I needed to change my needle size. But I didn't swatch by changing my needle size. I just went for it. And I feel like that was kind of a mistake. Because when I wear this, it does kind of like inch up around my neck in the sense that perhaps it doesn't fit. I don't believe that. Here's the thing. Okay, so the let me defend my choices here. The sweater, the yoke is so deep. So when you're when you're knitting this, the yoke does not stop until here, which is so like it's so deep. So what I mean by that is where the yoke stops is where the sleeve now starts. So up here, the sleeve starts, okay, about here. On that sweater, the sleeve does not start until like down here. So until the sleeve starts, it's just all one big piece. And your shoulders still have to move, but they have like less sleeve to work with, if that makes sense. So I think that's like what I'm running into. And I don't know if that's like a fit issue because the other version of the sweater I knit did not do that, but it was so oversized and I just did not want this sweater to be oversized again. So I think I might have like run into an issue where I knit it in the right size, but it still needed to be oversized for it to like fit and fall correctly. But I'm not mad about this sweater. I really like it. I haven't woven in this. And oh my gosh, I know why I didn't do that because I knit the sleeves and I felt like they were going to be too big. So on this sleeve, about halfway down the ribbing, I switched to a smaller needle so that it would just be a little bit tighter around like the narrowest part of my wrist. And it worked out well. And so I didn't weave in this end because I wanted to do that on this one. I just didn't go back and unravel it. So, I don't know. I think, I've worn this quite a bit. I think I would wear it more if it fit better. I think maybe I just need to reblock it. I think I'm going to do that and we'll see what happens. But I do love the color. The color that she knit the original sweater in is very similar, but it's knit in Brooklyn tweed. And I don't love Brooklyn tweed. Not because it's not beautiful yarn, but it's not like super hard wearing. So I wanted to find a color that was very similar to what she knit it in so that I could recreate it, but with a yarn that worked better for me. So I knit this and finished it in about probably pretty close to when I got back. So like in August. And then immediately cast on another one. And you might have said, hey, Julianne, did you wait until you blocked this one? The one that you knit with the wrong size needles, just to make sure that it fit okay before you knit this one? No, I did not. I didn't. Do I have the same fit issues? Obviously I do. Do I care? I don't know. I haven't worn this one that much. I do really like this color. So on the heels of this one, I had already bought the yarn before I left to knit this one. And it matches a pair of clogs that I have perfectly. So I needed it immediately. I actually knit the short rows really badly. So you can see I just like ended up on the wrong side there and I made no attempt to fix it. I just kept going. This sweater is just, it takes so long to knit because it's in garter stitch. So like every row you basically have to knit twice. Stockinette is much flatter. It uses less yarn. It's so squishy and it's fun and it's, squish. But it uses a lot of yarn and it feels like, when like people are filming Olympic swimmers and they're like filming them head on and it looks like they're going so fast and then they do like a side shot and someone is just like walking at an average pace next to them much faster. That is what it feels like to knit garter stitch. It feels like you're doing so much knitting and you're just going so slowly because the stitch is so dense. This yarn, obviously this is the same pattern, the Wool and Honey pattern. This yarn is Knit Picks Palette, which is it's my thing at the moment. Knit Picks Palette is a fingering weight yarn that comes in like 200 colors. It's just regular wool. It's a 2-ply yarn and I love it so much. I have this huge wrap that I knit years ago. Like, oh my gosh, I actually knit it a decade ago, which hurts my heart to say. But I always notice with this wrap that it just wears so well. Like there are never any pills on it and it's old. So it comes in so many colors. I feel like it gets a bad rap because it's knit picks, which is stupid. Knit with what you want to knit with. It is also incredibly cost effective to knit with. A ball of it is like $4 and it has 230 yards in it. And like I said, it comes in a million colors, so it's great for color work. And they have sales like twice a year. They're 2 big sales. And a lot of the times you can get palette for at least 20% off. Some of the colors go on sale for like half off. So this color is called Caper. I'm almost positive it's called Caper or it's called Serpentine. It's one of those two. But I don't know. I love this color. And I saw the colorway and I immediately wanted to knit the sweater with it. This sweater pattern is good for when you just want to knit a solid color, but you still want the sweater to be interesting. I do feel like these two colors are very fall colors. So I haven't worn these as much lately just because they feel like very autumnal and it's January. So Not that much to say about this. I think the gauge is probably a little bit different. Um, this yarn it's still wool, but it's not quite as like scratchy, or not that this is scratchy, but this is very woolly wool, and this is slightly not. I think palette is very soft. Like, it's not a scratchy yarn. But I love this one too. And it does, I have a pair of clogs that it matches perfectly, which is not necessary. Your sweaters don't have to match your shoes, but it's nice when they do. The last sweater I have to show you is actually not the last sweater I knit. I knit my dad a sweater for Christmas that I'm not going to show you. But this sweater pattern is actually not meant for a solid color. The sweater pattern is called the Lyon sweater, and it is obviously named after Lyon, France. I think the Petite Knits wore it in Lyon, France. I think she knit hers in like a cotton yarn, and it's striped. So like the Marinière top is like a classic French top. I know I said that wrong. But it's like a striped top that they wore in the north of France like years ago, and now like tourists wear striped shirts when they go to France. Um, so the actual pattern is striped, but I wanted to knit it striped, but I also really wanted just a cream colored sweater. I am trying to be very intentional about knitting things that fit into a wardrobe. I feel like too often in my knitting career, I have knit things that are beautiful and look great with jeans. And that's pretty much all. Like, the sweater is the star of the show, which is great. I want the sweater to be the star of the show because then people say, amazing, that's an amazing sweater. And then you get to say, I knit it. It's less fun to knit things that people aren't going to assume that you knit. People that sew their clothing call this something. Oh, they call it sewing frosting. So it's like the idea of you always want to sew like the fun thing. You want to sew the frosting. You never want to like sew like the cake, which are like your basics that you would actually wear all the time. So I'm trying to be better about knitting things that I actually need in my wardrobe and that can be styled versus just being the star of the show. And a cream sweater was something I really wanted. I really wanted like a fluffy cream sweater. And I really wanted something with this type of folded like collar. Um and this is actually what I wanted the collar of that purple sweater to look like. So the way that you get this is not by knitting it like a raglan. You knit this starting with the back. So this is not, it's not seamed necessarily, but it is kind of knit in pieces. So you start by knitting the back. So you knit the back and the shoulders, and then once you get to about, I don't know, like here, then you put that on waist needles and you cast on each of these sides, and you knit the sides separately, and then you join them in the middle, and then later you would go back and pick up the stitches to knit the collar. So very different construction. I really do like this construction though. It's a different fit than you get with like a top-down raglan sweater or a colorwork sweater. It's a little bit more like structured and tailored. And you get like this really lovely little seam right here. And yeah, it was something different. It was a different construction, but I really enjoyed it. I have yarn to knit this in the actual striped version, but more pressing in my wardrobe was the need for this color sweater. And I really like it. I've actually only worn this once. I wore it to a Christmas party. I talked about how I learned how to do the Italian bind off, and you're probably not going to be able to see this. This is a sweater that I learned how to do it for. It's a variation of the tubular bind off. You kind of like do this slip stitch thing before you actually bind it off, and it just makes the edge a little bit like thicker, like more rounded, and I really like that. And I'm going to do that in everything now. So yeah, so I'm going to knit this again, but in the actual striped version. I feel like I could have gone down a size. It is a little bit more oversized than I wanted it to be, but I didn't swatch, so that's my fault. I knit this with Knit Picks palette. I knit it in the cream colorway, and I held it with the cream colorway of Knitting for Olive. So Knitting for Olive, their mohair is like €6 a ball. Sometimes she does free shipping, and so when you convert it, it's still less than $7 for a ball of mohair, and that is the best price on mohair I've seen anywhere. So combined with Knit Picks palette, it's a pretty cost-effective mohair sweater. Yeah, there's like stuff all over this because it's cream. I had a very specific vision for this sweater. I actually ordered the mohair in what I thought would be the perfect color, and it wasn't. And so I returned it, and it took me like 2 months to get the yarn for this sweater, and I think it was worth it. Yeah, she's cute. There's a mirror over there again. I'm not crazy, but yes, this is a very cute sweater. I'm glad I have it. It reminds me of something from Saison, which is my favorite store. That is all of the things that I've knit in the past 6 months, which is pretty good. That's like about a sweater a month, which is what I tell people I average. So the first third of my trip that I told you I would tell you about started in Rome. And if you'll recall from my old episode, I was getting ready to embark on this trip. I work remotely, and I just chose to work remotely from Europe for the summer. I kept calling it Work from Rome. Very clever. And yeah, the goal of the trip was just to get to stay places a little bit longer than I normally would and work at the same time. So I worked in the evening. And I chose to start my trip in Rome. So I went to Chicago for a work event, and then I left from Chicago in June, and I went to Rome for a whole month. I've never actually, that was my first time in Italy and my first time in Rome. So it was really special. I ate so much good food. I saw everything. There's so much to see in Rome. So I'm very glad that I had so much time to spend there, because it really allowed me to see an amazing historical, cultural artifact, see it, come back home, and get to digest it instead of like having to see it all at once. I feel like, and tell me in the comments if you did Rome in a couple of days, if that was overwhelming, because I was there for a month and I felt like Rome was still overwhelming at the end of a whole month there. But it was amazing. I stayed a little bit outside of the city. So I was in a neighborhood called Pimento, and it was very hot when I was there. It was always above 90. My Airbnb, so I stayed in an Airbnb. It was just like a small apartment. It was perfect for me. It very fortunately had air conditioning. That is not always a given when you're in Europe, especially in Italy. So if you're going to Italy in the summer, know that it is very, very hot, and you need air conditioning. You might be able to get away without it, but I was also working, so it would have been very uncomfortable for me to be there without air conditioning. I am also a person that is always cold, so that's really saying something. But yeah, it was magical. I did so much. I got to go to Florence one weekend. I just took the train to Florence. I went to Castel Gandolfo, which is where the Pope's summer house is. I kept calling it the Pope's Malibu dream house. And that was really cool. It's like on a cratered lake. That was really cool. So I did Florence, I did Castel Gandolfo, and I just like saw a lot of Rome. There's so much to see in Rome. I feel like there were still things I missed, but I did all the big sites. I did walking tours. I ate a lot of really good food. One of my favorite meals was the 7-course wine tasting dinner that I did. And it was so much fun. I was there it was just me, which was so much fun. I truly enjoy traveling by myself. I enjoy just spending time alone And when I was in Rome, it was just me, and I had so much fun. I did not feel like there was anything that I missed out on. I still went out to dinner plenty of times, and just thoroughly enjoyed my own company for a month, and I got to meet people traveling solo that I might not have met if I were traveling with someone else. So take this as your like permission to go on a trip by yourself. If there's a trip you've always wanted to go on but you didn't have someone to go with, go alone. It's so much fun, and it's very empowering that I just navigated myself through another country for a long time. So that was the first third of my trip, and that's all you're gonna get. I'm sure I'll have put in some pictures for you to take a look at. If you want to hear about the rest of my trip and all of the things that I'm currently knitting, you have to come back to the next episode.